Hello again, everybody. In my last video, I talked about a few of the things that led to my finally beginning to question the religion I'd been raised in since birth, Jehovah's Witnesses. But it's fair to say that those things I talked about weren't huge issues. I had probably lived through bigger things, things that should have bothered me more. But when you're that indoctrinated, you can cover over almost anything. So what I really credit as having a big contributing factor as to why these things bothered me at that time was that at the same time I was learning a foreign language. So in April of 2023, I decided to start to learn Japanese. And this was a bit weird. For Jehovah's Witnesses, often you just don't have time for hobbies. The organization keeps you very busy, so especially a hobby like learning a language, there's usually not room for that in your schedule. Additionally, I wasn't learning it to support kingdom interests, so that puzzled the Jehovah's Witnesses I told. I wasn't going to serve in a foreign land. I wasn't going to join a foreign language group. It was just a hobby. I was just doing it for myself because it was a language I was interested in. But I had no idea how much it would impact me. Yeah, looking back, I really credit learning Japanese with opening my mind so that I could finally question whether what I'd been taught to believe was the truth. I wonder now, Jehovah's Witnesses discourage higher education, going to university, independent thinking, critical thinking, and this might be one of the reasons why. Because when you really start to develop your thinking ability, you might actually examine your religion. And when you do so, that exposes a lot of things that the organization might not want you to see. Maybe it's for this reason that Jehovah's Witnesses are repeatedly, constantly reminded not to look at negative information about Jehovah's Witnesses. And if you're going to do research, use the organization's own resources to do that research. You're not to go to external sources. So I was kind of breaking the norm, I guess, by having this hobby and doing something for myself, but I'm so happy I did. And it wasn't just learning a language, thinking differently, having that little bit of a widened view. For those who aren't familiar, when you learn a language, you have to learn the culture along with it. So you end up finding out a lot about a culture that maybe before you didn't know much about, which was my case. And Japanese is completely different from North American culture, so it was very interesting to me. It kind of expanded my view of the world. But more than that, also had an impact because in my city, there's very few Japanese people. So when I got to the point that I needed to practice, I needed people to do language exchange with, I didn't know really many people locally. So I have an app on my phone and it connects you with other people who are trying to learn English. So I would talk to people in Japan who were learning English, teach them a little English, they would teach me a little Japanese. And so again, for the first time in my life, I was associating with people who were not Jehovah's Witnesses. And that really opened my mind too, because Jehovah's Witnesses are taught that worldly people, so basically anyone who's not a Jehovah's Witness, should never be close friends. Like, you should keep your distance. The contact you have with them would be to help them learn about Jehovah, basically to recruit them to the organization. So this was different. I was talking to these people, and it had an impact because they weren't what the organization had taught me to believe they would be. I'd always been taught people who don't have the truth, who are not Jehovah's Witnesses, they don't have good values, they're negative, they're depressed, whatever. But I didn't find that at all. These people were so kind, so encouraging, they were motivated, they had a good outlook on the future, And they also had good values. They wanted to take care of their parents, contribute to their society, live in a way that would be helpful to others. Lots of them had really noble goals. So that was strange to me. And then even further, of course, typically, like, we wouldn't talk about religion, but if it ever did come up, the only answer I ever heard from the Japanese people I talked to was that they hate religion. And that surprised me even more, because Jehovah's Witnesses are really taught that people who hate religion, or even particularly atheists, would be especially immoral and an especially negative influence. But these people weren't. In fact, my Japanese textbook, it talks about a survey of Japanese people, and it said that only 9% identify as religious. So here were these people that were almost completely self-identifying as non-religious. They were telling me they hate religion, but they were kind. They were nice. I was enjoying their company. So that kind of shook me. It changed my view of what worldly people are like. But then it really got me thinking. I started to think about the billions of people who live in Asia who really never have much contact with Christianity or with the Bible, let alone Jehovah's Witnesses. I didn't meet a single Japanese person who had heard of Jehovah's Witnesses. I thought, how can Jehovah's Witnesses claim to be preaching to all people before Armageddon comes, and that's coming so soon, but after doing that for hundreds of years, there are so many people, such a significant part of the population, who've never heard of them? I started thinking, how could God give a message to mankind? He gave them the Bible, and yet so many people would never read it or even have an opportunity to read it before they died, both historically and in modern times. I thought, how did these Asian cultures seem to have so many of the same moral values that the Bible taught, even though I was told it was only because of the Bible that people would hold to those standards? There was even an interesting story I read. It was a Japanese story, but it was about a flood. And it was very, very similar to the account in the Bible. So similar that it's obvious that they are, one is based off the other, or they're both based off one story. Like, they're way too similar. Except the Japanese one talks about multiple gods. And has some significant differences as well. But then when I looked up this story, it was also ancient. Maybe as old or older than the Bible. So all of this was going on my head. I thought, how could I possibly try to go to these people and tell them I had the truth, I could teach them how to live, I knew the only way to make God happy, when for thousands of years they've had this successful culture that seemed to be doing pretty well, and my religion was only a couple of hundreds of years old. It struck me that really I was a Jehovah's Witness because my parents were Jehovah's Witnesses. My parents were Jehovah's Witnesses, for my father's case, because his father was a Jehovah's Witness. My grandfather became a Jehovah's Witness largely because he lived in an area where Jehovah's Witnesses lived. It struck me that the vast majority of people really just belong to the religion that either they were raised in or is a part of their culture. Even Japanese people, they say they're not religious, but their life includes many religious activities that are based off either Buddhism or Shintoism. So it's interesting that that's just cultural to them. And I think for a lot of people that's true. Religion is more cultural than it is spiritual or individual. So now my mind was thinking about these things, was expanding my worldview. I was becoming more and more bothered by what was happening in the organization around me. So I finally set out to prove to myself that no, my religion was different. I had the true religion. It wasn't like these other ones. So I was going to look at things for myself, but this time I was going to do my best not to have a biased perspective. I would look at my religion the same way I would look at any religion. Just examine it in a fair way and see what I found. My hope was that I'd have a stronger faith than ever, but as you know, that's not how things turned out. So before I move on, I just want to thank all of the people in Japan who helped me along the way. A special thank you to my 92-year-old Japanese friend here who was in my congregation. We would practice Japanese together. I'm so grateful for her. She was a wonderful woman. I'm sorry to say that she died earlier this month. Unfortunately, I only recently found out. No one bothered to tell me, so I found it on my own. But thank you so much to Janine. And in my next video, I want to talk about my experiences with finding out the truth about Jehovah's Witnesses. So thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.